Good afternoon and welcome to this seminar on craft, organising against the mainstream, brought to you by Lund University School of Economics and Management. My name is Karis Egan-Wire. I'm a researcher in consumption and sustainability here at the School of Economics and Management, and today I'll be your moderator. Before we get into our panel conversation, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Stefan Schäfer, who is senior lecturer also here at the School of Economics and Management, and he is going to introduce the subject of craft.
Yes.
Over to
Thank you very much, Karis. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I have the honor to introduce the subject in a few words, and I'm really trying to keep myself short because we as researchers tend to talk too long and too much. So I want to give you a few pointers for the discussion later on. What I would like to do is to unpack the title of the event, right? Craft, Organizing Against the Mainstream. So what I would like to talk about is the idea of craft, the concept of craft. What does craft mean? What have researchers discussed with respect to craft? What are current expressions of craft? Second, the idea of being against the mainstream. The mainstream is a very difficult concept, right? What is the mainstream? And what may be wrong with it? Why do we have to, or why do we want to organize against the mainstream? But I want to start leading my presentation, or leading into my presentation, with an anecdote involving Fredrik Ek from Bekkeriet that you're going to get to know later on. So Fredrik is a frequent guest lecturer on my course on creativity. And when he came the first time, he lectured, of course, on process of creativity, what creativity means in Bekkeriet. But he also talked about growth. He talked about the hesitation of Bekkeriet to grow. And silence fell over the classroom. Like, business students couldn't grapple with the idea that if you have a successful product, you don't want to grow. You don't want to scale your production immediately and quickly to sell more of your product. And during the discussion that ensued among the students, Fredrik explained their passion for brewing, their passion for the product, the craft. But he also explained the notion of community and how it brought him so much satisfaction to work in this community. And so in that moment, having always have had an interest in brewing and craft, I'm a home brewer myself, an idea for a research project was born. What if I combine my interests with systematically looking into why craft breweries choose to do what they're doing, and how do they organize differently? And so the Bekkeriet case really tells us a lot about the idea of craft. And so let me sort of turn to the first insights about the passion and the nature of the work Bekkeriet was doing, and here the notion of craft really comes into play. Craft evokes images of tradition, customs, and even old-fashioned ways of working and producing. And it also gives you an image of conservatism, right? Hierarchy, even narrow-mindedness. All in all, the image of craft seems that it is quite outdated in our times of automation, mass production, and large-scale production that cannot take time. We need a lot of things, and we need them fast. And so craft really doesn't fit into that really well. Yet while these first notions of craft, or first images, have some justifications, we should take a step back from these ideas and images and view craft as a timeless form of work. Something we have done for a long time, even perhaps going back to us as a species, right? Us as working or engaging in activities. And this is what a recent review of the literature has indeed concluded, namely that craft is a timeless approach to work that prioritizes human engagement over machine control. So craft, as some researchers argue, has always existed as a counterweight to industrialized mass production. It's a resistance to mechanization, de-skilling, and alienation that comes with some modern forms of work. And I think this contrast between mechanization and human engagement is what we in Sweden would call the red thread for thinking about craft. This contrast, I think, is one of the defining elements. But let me return to the image of craft as an outdated form of work. And a quotation by the writer Glenn Adamson, who has written a lot about craft, highlights well the relation of craft and time. He writes, and I quote, "Craft's relationship to time is complex, rather like a novel set in the past, but written in the present. When the potential of this temporal structure is realized, craft can be a powerful mediator between the present and the past, and therefore between the individual and the collective." End quote. So I think the metaphor of a story written in the past and practiced in the present is really evocative. So craft may draw on past traditions and past knowledge, but it may be adapted to the present and even to the future challenges that we have ahead of us. So craft is timeless, perhaps. So modern craft brewing, the topic of today, is really part of a renaissance of craft. So the story based on traditions and written in the present, with now over 400 new breweries in Sweden alone. The current story written on craft brewing in Sweden and the world is timely, and it's very important to discuss, I think. It has the potential to serve as an inspiration for creating modern and humanist forms of organizing work. But for now, I would like to come back to the dimensions of craft and what have researchers identified as the timeless features of craft. 4 dimensions, I believe, are important to think about craft: intrinsic motivation, skill development, bodily engagement, and community. So regarding the first dimension, a quote by sociologist Richard Sennett may elucidate that better. He says the essence of craft is, and I quote, "doing an activity for the sake of doing the activity," end quote. Doing an activity for the sake of doing it, right? An activity is not a means to an end, it's a means in itself. And this flags already the kind of motivational direction, the motivational thrust of craft. Craft means we enjoy doing what we're doing. And I think this stands really in contrast to work that is done for external rewards, work that is geared towards earning money or likes or fame or whatever. The second dimension, skill development, is really related to the passion of learning and developing your skills in craft. Again, a sociologist, Howard Becker, wrote, craft is related to knowledge and skill which produce useful objects and activities. So these skills are really developed through a really continuous, deep engagement with a matter or with a craft that you're interested in as a craft person. And the exploration is the key here, right? The need to understand and penetrate problems and finding solutions. And again, we see a difference here to other forms of work that either aim to reduce the skills the employees have, commonly referred to as de-skilling, or breaking up the production process in small repetitive tasks. And this minimizes, I believe, the development of holistic skills in the production process, and also gaining an overview of what is produced and how it is produced. Thirdly, craft tends to involve manual work. So craft translated into Swedish and into German is referred or is translated as Handwerk, right? So Handwerk, you work with your hands. And so Sennett, again, Richard Sennett speaks here about the intimate connection between the craft person and the objects they're working on with their hands. And it's an almost intimate relationship. And again, another sociologist, so I'm citing a lot of sociologists here, so apparently they have talked a lot about craft. Hartmut Rosa talks about resonance. Right? Resonance meaning that we do not work on something, but we are drawn, when we're working, we're drawn into a nurturing relationship with something, right? We're related to the object we're working with. And again, it's this relationship and this intimation with something that I think characterizes a craft. And this also may be missing in modern forms of work, right? I don't know, for me it's hard to imagine someone having a resonance or an intimate relationship with the latest software program that is kind of enrolled in an organization, right? And this is also connotation, the bodily engagement with what Karl Marx has referred to as alienation, right? Our removement from the manual process of production. Last but for sure not least is the communal aspect of craft. Craft is not a solitary engagement, by no means. Craft is connected to a community of making and fixing things that is again embedded within a community of use. There's thus a diversity of different communities related to the specific craft that you're engaging in. So craft persons interact with each other to find solutions, to cooperate, to build knowledge within their community. Yet the community as such is also fed by the consumption of craft products. There's an active dialogue between producers and consumers. This, of course, again stands in contrast to the competitiveness of businesses, the idea of gaining advantage over others, and seeing the consumer as some sort of manipulative variable, right? Someone I can manipulate to sell more of my product. Craft, I believe, is very much based on the notion of Gemeinschaft, right? The idea of interacting with the people that have an interest in my craft. And so let me come to the second part of this title and unpacking the title. So as it may have become already clearer, craft is in today's business environment opposed to many of the developments in modern forms of work. So the mainstream work today is not craft, but it's really based on an expanding mass production of products and goods and services based on automation and mechanization. And the human engagement is really crowded out of these developments. And this may have a few consequences. And this quote is from a study on the US craft brewing community, or industry as they call it. And I think it captures very nicely the sentiments of why the community developed what the researchers have called an oppositional identity. An identity that goes against big beer, mega breweries, mass-produced beer. And so I quote, "Our research indicates that for craft breweries, their ideological opposition to mega breweries has been multifaceted, including disdain for the mass production of low-quality, flavorless beer, tasteless marketing techniques, consolidation of breweries, enormous size, disregard for local communities, unfair distribution practices, coercive lobbying effort, and overall deterioration of beer quality and choice throughout the United States," end quote. This is a lot to take in if I were big beer. And I believe that this quotation doesn't need so much interpretation, and I think it's a good start for our discussion. But as we discussed a lot, also me, Eric and Fredrik, I would like to reframe this scathing critique into something more positive perhaps, right? What is craft focusing on rather than what it is against? And so there are, I think, 4 points of departure or 4 points of discussion. The first that we already touched upon is the awareness of high quality in craft products. And it's about first and foremost improving the quality of products and then thinking about a sensible strategy for growth. And this is, I believe, what Fredrik tried to tell my students as well. And here I would like to cite the words of John Kimmich, the founder of the brewery The Alchemist, one of the most influential craft breweries in the world. He said, "We keep things in check. We keep production at a level we find sustainable, where we can maintain quality and control." Secondly, there's a focus on engagement, and I've touched upon that already. There's a focus on engaging with the customers rather than manipulating them to buy more product. And there I want to just briefly mention a fascinating study of price-setting behaviors of craft persons in southern India. So this is not about craft brewing, but this is about craft. The study found that when the audience or the customers were appreciative of the craft and engaged with the craft person, that person, the craft person, would charge a lower price. If the person wouldn't be very appreciative of the craft, like maybe you're mainstream tourist, right, just bringing home some stuff from India, the craft person would charge higher prices. And so one of the upshots, one of the results of the study is that when you engage with the craft and the craft person, the person will try not pursue financial motives, but even give you their craft output or their product for a lower price, right? So here really financial motives are taking a back seat when it comes to the engagement, right? Rather than manipulating people to buy more products. And this also relates to the next points, namely that there's a focus on sustainability and almost an inbuilt focus on sustainability in craft organization. One of the findings from the craft brewing industry, craft brewing community in the US, was that craft breweries were striving to make profits rather than maximize profits. And I think there's really a subtle distinction, and it's not so subtle, it's a subtle distinction in linguistically, but I think in practice this is not a very subtle distinction, because the making of profits allows that other resources are freed up for other missions or other purposes of the organization, such as finding ways to increase social sustainability or ecological sustainability. And I think we'll have a lot to talk about that with Fredrik and Eric as well. And lastly, a study from the US shows that the craft brewing community is characterized by co-opetition. So co-opetition is a word creation out of competition and cooperation. So craft breweries of course compete with each other, usually in a friendly way, but they also help each other out. They support the community as a whole, and they wouldn't say no to other breweries if they sought help. So again, there's a characteristic of a cooperative attitude rather than sort of a cutthroat competition, right? Rather than making and maximizing your profit. So all in all, I believe that these practices constitute good starting points for discussion. And I really would like to hear what Fredrik and Eric have to say about those. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you so much, Stefan. Really interesting presentation. Now I'd like to introduce our guests today. Stefan and I are much more in on the theoretical ideas here about craft and sustainability and so on, but these are the experts in what's going on in the real world of craft. So welcome Fredrik Ek, who is the co-founder of craft brewery Bräckeriet, based in Landskrona. And we also have Erik Fritiof, partner at Hylje Bryggeri, which is a craft brewery based in Malmö. And Eric is also the chairperson of the Association for Sweden's Independent Small Breweries, right?
Yeah.
And not only, but the founder of the Great Swedish Beer Festival, an annual event held in Malmö. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
And welcome all of you who's here in the audience and joining us online. So the plan here is we're going to have around 30 minutes of discussion, kind of led by me, but hopefully hearing mostly from you guys. And then we'll open up for questions from the audience here and at home. So get ready your questions. Great. So I thought I'd start with some kind of nice and easy questions. So I wanted to ask just about how you would define yourselves and your businesses. Do you see them as businesses? Are you business owners, entrepreneurs, or something else? We want to start with you, Eric.
Yeah, we are business owners and entrepreneurs, and we're all that you have to be to run a company, of course. But I think Stefan nailed it in his the dimensions of craft. It's something else than just running a business and maximizing profits and so on. We do it for the love of craft, and we do it for the love of community and runner.
Is that similar to you, how you feel about that?
Yeah, we are three brothers owning and running Bräckeriet, hence the name, Brothers Bräckeriet. And when we started in 2011 working together, it came out of a hobby. we nerded down in beer, craft beer, tried to find different kinds of beers that we haven't had before. And when we started, we had no idea about the community and what we did. We just loved the thing and focused on the craft without knowing why.
So community, as Stefan has already mentioned, and now that's something that you've also brought up, that sounds like it's a really important part of what you do. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, Stefan also said you never say no to another brewery. You always help out. In case a brewery contacts us and are low on grain or malts, we for sure help them. Same thing with hops, bottles, kegs, everything. Also helping out with distribution, sales. I got a mail from our Japanese importer today asking if I could help him to organize transport with a Belgian brewery because, yeah, he noticed I know them. So, yeah, of course, no problem. So, those kinds of things.
And that extends to maybe how you think about your customers as well, that they are a sort of part of this community, would you say?
Yes.
Yeah, they definitely are. It's we're going on festivals and fairs and whatever, and being out doing tap takeovers at bars and pubs all the time. That's our way of doing marketing. We don't have any money to buy big billboards or anything or TV commercials. So our strategy of marketing is often be out and meet with the consumers directly. At another places or at our own place or so they're big. When we say community, it's both the actual beer community where we involve all the consumers and restaurant owners or whatever, but there's also a perspective where you talk about the community as a whole, like we care for the city or the small village or whatever that we are based in. So there's two parts of the community discussion.
Almost three parts, maybe, right? Because you've talked about the community of breweries,
the
community of the customers,
or that's also
consumers.
very important. Yeah, I counted them as the beer community.
They also drink beer.
Yeah, but definitely, yes. As Fredrik said, also that we're helping out each other because, like this co-opetition. For me and Fredrik, for example, we do like totally different beers, so we can help each other to sell beer. Because if I have a client that says, I want 3 of your beers, but I also want a sour beer, and we don't have a sour beer at the moment, I called Fredrik and said, hey, I have a customer who wants sour beer. Can you, drive there with 3 cases or a keg or whatever. So we always help out each other, even though we are competitors in the industry.
And we talked earlier as well about how this maybe concept of community extends to how you think about your shareholders. Right? That's a slightly different relationship there than maybe bigger businesses would have with their shareholders.
Yeah. We did when we started our company, or not when we started an actual company, but when we started a new era of the company, we did a crowdfunding campaign, and I know you did it too a couple of years ago, and that's not only to get a lot of money. Sure, we wanted the money, but we also wanted them to be ambassadors for the brand and to be out and speak. So like every time we release a new beer, 100 of people are posting that onto Facebook, or they go out to restaurants and say, like their favorite restaurants, and say, hey, here they released new beer, can you buy that? So we have like 100 salespersons around Sweden that are just very good brand ambassadors. So that is as good as the money they gave us.
But then you give something back to them as
well.
They
Exactly.
You invite them to the community. In our case, every year we brew a shareholders beer, where they can decide what kind of beer it's going to be, if we are going to put berries in it or everything. And then they're able to buy it only for the shareholders.
We stole that idea, but we haven't done it yet.
So offering them some kind of real
it's a good idea. It's a really good
exclusivity
idea.
in the community.
Yeah.
Stefan, is that something that's typical of craft organizations, this
Yeah.
kind of thinking about shareholders in a different way?
Yes,
To the
I think
next
so, and I think it's a mutual relationship. I think that shareholders who invest in a craft brewery, we talked about that as well. They won't expect a quick return, right? And as I understand you, it's a long-term investment, right? It's something that we see not so often anymore, right? We want to turn our money around quickly, and we want to make the largest profit, right? So in investing in Bräckeriet or Hylje might give you a return in the future, but it's more of an investment in the community and an investment in engaging with you. And I know that you do brewery tours for the shareholders as well, and so it's like a really hands-on sort of investment in that sense.
When we did that campaign, we said to all the investors that you shouldn't expect a return in 7 to 10 years, but we can promise you emotional return in the first 6 months.
Yeah.
So
Return on emotions. That's a new concept.
Is that something that you think other organizations can learn from here? And I'm thinking now specifically when we think about building organizations for a more sustainable future, where perhaps we have to think about slower growth or even no growth at all.
Yeah.
Is this way of relating to shareholders and investors, is that something we can take with us to mainstream organizations?
Yeah, I think it's that. I know it's stroke a chord with you when we talked about it, and Eric said straight away, yeah, it's about making profit and not maximizing profit. And I think it's that difference that is a good heuristics for how we want to, what our purpose should be with an organization, right? Making profit and freeing up other resources. Another thing, maybe not related to the shareholder, but also the idea of involving or trying to shift more to the human engagement in an organization, right? Rather than, and I suggested in another place to say, well, sometimes you could think about, should we mechanize a process? Or should we leave it as it is and have people involved in that and working with us, right? And that might be inefficient, but it might raise the kind of craft spirit in an organization. And I know that some craft breweries, they retain that hands-on. I've seen your brother working very much with sort of hands-on production and hands-on brewing, so I think it's those two parts: making profits and trying to think about the human engagement in an organization,
or maximizing profits without sacrifice the soft values or the key values of the company, because we still want to make money.
Yeah. Yeah.
If a shareholder is watching. Just kidding. Yeah.
But there must be a difference between maximizing, because maximizing rules out everything else.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you need to have resources for doing other. I mean, Frederick could say, "Well, I'm not going to help someone in Belgium to my time is valid, right? It's efficient. I need to do what I need to do, right? Rather than helping other people out."
Yeah,
I think this is also an attitude of sort of not making everything too efficient, perhaps.
I'm also thinking about, given that today in capitalist societies, so much of the way we evaluate things is whether they make money, whether they make profits, whether they're efficient. How do you measure your success if those are not your measures? How do you measure success of craft? Tricky question.
Yeah, I mentioned it in early discussion with you're very pleased when you see on Instagram a nice picture of your beer with some great text about it. That's a value. And also good marketing.
Yeah.
So yes, that's one.
Yeah, and also like sales is still a part of that, like evaluating the craft, because if we didn't do a good product, we wouldn't sell anything. And as Systembolaget, the monopoly works in Sweden, we always have to, like, they don't sell the beer, they just the shop where you buy the beer, but we have to sell it and we have to market it. So if we do good beer and we're good at the marketing and we're good at going out to the community and talk about it, we sell more at Systembolaget. That's how it works. Yeah.
So sales, even if not maximizing
yeah,
profits,
exactly.
but
yeah,
maximizing
But
sales,
that's how you can measure it. Even if you're not talking about measuring financially, you can also measure the quality or how successful you are in your marketing or whatever. With you look at the Systembolaget numbers or the numbers at local restaurants that still wants to buy your beer, even though it's a little bit more expensive than the big beer and whatever. Yeah.
And that's an interesting point. I was just thinking about coming onto cost, thinking about the price of craft beer. It is typically more expensive than big beer or more mass-produced beer, right? Now, typically we tend to think in, if you think very rationally about consumers, they want low price, they want best kind of value. But that's not the case for craft beer consumers, right? They're consuming perhaps something else. They're paying for something else, some other kind of values. I wonder if you have any ideas or could talk more about that. Why are they willing to pay more?
We basically said it the whole time. They are consuming what we do in the big perspective, and they're consuming the community, and we sell beer for the correct price. Yeah. So we don't have a higher price. It's the other ones that have a lower price. Yeah.
Too low.
Too low. Yeah. So that's what good beer costs if you do it properly and you use real ingredients and stuff. Even though being bigger have some the more volume, the more
economies of scale.
Yeah, exactly. But we always charge exactly what we think it should cost. Yeah.
I think maybe there's some interesting lessons there. Again, looking to the future with organizations that are perhaps more sustainable from an ecological perspective, that there's something for the mainstream to learn about how you've managed to get these consumers to pay the right price, right? A price that reflects the real costs and real externalities.
But the thing is, also I want to add something, is our consumers often don't buy our beer to drink 20 beer in an evening and to get drunk, but they buy cheap beer to do that. So our consumers are much more mature and much more, but in their tastes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can pay 150 kronor for a bottle of wine that you know about and you heard about and you think is really good, and you do the same with beer, because we stepped up, even though I still refer to us as the ugly duckling in the gastronomy world, but we stepped up and people are actually enjoying beer in another way than they do if they drink the same thing, 20 bottles of it.
Fredrik, you, especially at Brekeriet, have been working with some ecological sustainability.
Yes.
Right? You want to tell us something more about that?
Yes, we're certified organic producers. We always use Swedish organic malts. We try to find berries and fruits that are organic. So I can bring this one. I hid it here. Flowers. So this is a product, Tistron. We wanted to do an organic fruit beer, so it has the organic stamp. We offered it to a tender to Systembolaget, and because of the organic malts and the fruits, and the lower the can instead of a bottle, it's now rated as a sustainable choice at Systembolaget. So that's what we are working for. Pure products, pure ingredients, and sustainable production.
And again, is that something that mainstream organizations of all kinds can learn from, do you think? Or is there some learnings there for a state, the government, business researchers perhaps, on that we can learn from craft organizations on that?
Yeah, I think so. And also looking at locally produced ingredients more and more.
I want to go back again to, we talked about why do consumers pay more for craft beer or pay the right amount, shall we say. And I want to get a little bit cynical or critical and say, is there something to do with status here as well? Is there kind of, is there something that makes you stand out from the crowd when you post your picture of your craft beer on Instagram? Is that kind of a part of this craft stuff?
Yeah, probably. We shouldn't lie about that. Of course it is. Yeah, especially if you're in the you are in the beer community and you bought a very exclusive bottle or can or something. Of course you want to show it to. It's like everything. It's like when you eat breakfast and you have a great breakfast at the cafe. You post it. That's the era we live in. You post everything, so it's always about status as well.
And lots of breweries are also having, this is our volume product, and we also do small batch products, which is like 1,000 or 2,000 bottles. And when we release them, people are hunting them just to get it. Grab that one and call friends. Can you buy that one? It's released today. Can you buy it? Oh, sorry, it's gone. Oh, so it's yeah.
It works for you as well to be a small-scale producer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of prices, but also in terms of selling your products.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, craft breweries like Treehouse in the US and other breweries, they have these queues outside where they're just queuing, or Russian River Brewing where they tent outside to buy their beers when they're released. So there's also something about that small-scale production that works in your favor to sell.
Exactly. We don't have to grow to be able to produce more of a beer because it wouldn't sell that good. Because if it's exclusive, it sells faster and you can charge more, of course.
So I think there's maybe something really interesting here in when we're looking at a potentially post-growth future for organizations, that there's different kind of values that people get from these products. It doesn't have to be big scale or big production or mainstream. They get some values that's not only about having more. Having less can also be something valuable, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very.
I think there is something in the kind of emotional return on emotion sort of idea about the investors as well, that we have this connection to the community and also that engagement. That I remember that we talked at a beer festival, and for you as well, the feedback from consumers and the engagement on these festivals with people, that is worth more than selling 1,000 more cans. Yeah. So both, it's kind of mutual relationship. Both of you give a lot and get a lot back through that. So
I was just thinking to go back to some of the things you talked about during your introduction, Stefan, about kind of what is craft. And Stefan talked about intrinsic motivation, skills development, physical, bodily engagement, and community. And then we've perhaps added to that now with our discussion that there's some element of status in there as well. Does those kind of elements that Stefan's brought up resonate with you?
For me, craft or craft beer is the cornerstone of it is the ability or the possibility to always be experimental about what you do. You don't have, even though I'm the sales department at our place, but we don't have a sales department that tells the production, we need more of this, we need more of this, and next beer should only be a light lager because that sells, and we have those numbers that we show on a PowerPoint or whatever. We're always experimental. If we drink a good beer, we're brewing a Vienna lager this summer. It's a style that probably won't sell that much, but it's we have to try it, and we want to do it, and we like it ourselves. So we could easily sell 2,000 liters. So that's a batch, and if we don't sell that, or it's getting tougher to sell it, the last 200 liters. We just don't make another batch out of it and release a new beer instead. Because it's the easiest thing you can do is releasing a new beer at a craft brewery, because you don't need to invest in millions of marketing money or whatever. We just need to buy new labels and brew a different beer.
So the size enables you to make mistakes, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. It's that also. Yeah.
But also a good thing here with beer festivals is that it's possible to brew like 50 liters of a new beer that you think this would be great. And you serve it at a festival, discuss with the consumer directly, and see is this a beer we're going to continue brewing or just throw it away?
Yeah, we have at Hyllie we have a tap room open at weekends, and so we always brew 200 liters of the new beer, and then we can sell like 8 or 10 kegs in the tap room and get immediate response on that beer, and then we can decide if we want to brew 4,000 liters or 8,000 liters or whatever of it. So.
Stefan, did you have something to add?
Yeah, no, I think this is I mean. That is the idea of quality, I think. I mean, the idea of quality, producing small batches and really thinking about the quality, but also the idea of experimentation, right? I mean, I spent a few weeks in your brewery, and I've seen your brother experimenting. I mean, it was a pleasure to see, right? Someone so into the hands-on craft, and there's sort of small bottles everywhere, and you experimenting and trying and everything, and so I think it's this freedom, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? The autonomy
Freedom,
to not being bound to producing Becks or Maristas or whatever in the same fashion.
Definitely.
Can I ask how much because you're not so much involved in the production. How do you feel that? Do you feel that spirit in both
I'm
of
not
your
allowed
breweries?
in production. No.
Me neither.
Sorry, question.
Do you feel that kind of spirit in the organization, or that sort of idea of experimentation? How do you take part in that?
Yeah, for us, we're basically me and our head brewer who's like deciding on what beers we have. Then we always sit in something that looks like a meeting every week, and we can discuss this. So everybody gets the chance to have ideas. But me and Johan we are setting the actual production plan. But like everyone is involved, and we tell both our brewers to go nuts on the experiment brew system. You don't have to ask everyone else if you want to brew something on that one. Just brew something that you like, and we have 10 kegs, and we can try it on the market.
Yeah.
And
we used to do small, like 1 liter tests with different kinds of things in it. And at Monday meetings, we try the tests, the experiments, to see if it's going to be a good beer or not. We have had some disgusting experiments.
Yeah, but it's definitely an experimental environment as well.
Yeah,
it's like everyone gets their saying. Everyone can think of a new recipe or whatever, or a new label for that case.
Yeah.
Sometimes
or a beer name.
A beer name, yeah, that's a really good part of being a brewer. You can always choose whatever you want, and you can have a few beers when you discuss it, and it's very funny. Yeah.
Is that this kind of idea of craft, is it scalable? I don't mean, now we know that you as individual brewers don't necessarily want to grow, but this kind of idea that we might have a lot of craft organizations, does that work? Can all organizations be craft organizations? Stefan, you
please don't ask me.
I don't know. I haven't been in any other manufacturing industry, so I don't know. I can't tell.
I think
we can grow as companies. Like we see that big members of the organization that you were referring to in my presentation, like the smallest members brews like 1,000 liters per year, and the biggest member or largest member brews like 2.5 million. So it's a long range, and we as breweries can still grow to be like Oppigårds or Poppels or Nils Oskar or whatever, because we know that it works for them. So we have something to look up to and see. They have the same heart for what they do. They work in the same way in the bigger perspective. So we can be that. We can grow at least up to that limit. And in a few years, we will know if we can grow more, because they have probably been bigger. Yeah.
When do they fall into the realm of being big beer if they keep growing? Is it something to do with the soul of the company, or is it to do with the size?
I don't know. Like EU defines small producers of alcohol at 20 million liters. So I guess that's the limit.
No.
So it's pretty firm, we know.
Oh, that's
And an
unusual.
independent company shouldn't be owned by another company in the same industry for more than 25%. So small and independent have definitions, even though microbrewery or craft brewery doesn't have any definitions in that way. But small and independent has.
I was thinking that's so unusual for us as researchers to get a clear answer.
Well, I mean, coming to the scalability, I think the interesting aspect, and I think you mentioned Opigards. I mean, Opigards is I think they sold in the 8th, 9th place and selling the most beer in Sweden or something. I mean, one of these breweries are very top, and they have a true craft spirit, right? I mean, I think they're the most progressively ecologically sustainable breweries in Sweden. I mean, we talked about that as well. So they have implemented a lot of very innovative systems for their wastewater treatment and all that, and they're very proud of that as well. So I think there is a certain amount of scalability of this.
And the thing is, we don't have any mid-range breweries in Sweden, because you're either small or you're big. The largest small brewery is 2.5 million liters, if you count in that liters volume, and the smallest big brewery is about 50 million liter. So we have like a range of, there's no companies in it, so we don't know yet what's happening if either one of the big one falls down or one of the small one goes up to that.
But isn't that the idea of independent ownership really that one of the defining moments? I mean, there is instances in the craft brewing community where breweries have been bought by big beer, and then other breweries wouldn't go to their festivals, right? They cancel the festival.
Definitely.
So there's also that idea of independent ownership and independent. What's the kind of idea?
Heineken has a craft beer division.
So that's a kind of precondition of this. What did you call it? Co-opetition, right? This competing but cooperating. Is that they're not getting the big boys' help?
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps. I think we're soon going to open up for some questions, but I wanted to ask a little bit of a critical question before we do that, and that's a little bit about this idea of challenging the mainstream and who has the right to do that. And from my small observations, I noticed that the craft brewing tends to be very male, very white. And so I just wanted to get your feedback on that. Like, is there a kind of precondition that you need to be from a certain class or look a certain way to be able to challenge the mainstream? Or do you think everybody can do that?
You mean challenge the mainstream within craft or in general?
Either, but to be able to challenge and get away with that in some way, do you have to be white, male and middle class maybe?
No, I don't think so.
I think so, but we are mirroring the rest of the world. That's what we all have to fight for, to make that not such a important precondition. But it's
I think there are a lot of initiatives in the craft brewing community, especially in Sweden.
Definitely. But to be honest, we don't have to discuss that now. But a lot of the initiatives has become initiatives because of bad things had happened and happens in the craft beer industry as well. So we don't look away from that, of course.
But there is definitely a sort of a male domination in the craft brewing community that is traditionally derived, of course, but also had been a problem. But I think there is a real concerted efforts, at least in Sweden, with Ölgeris, for instance. One
Yeah,
of the,
definitely. Yeah. Feministas. Yeah.
Feministas.
The local
in
organization in Malmö. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And also, and maybe that's a sort of that's a different take on it, but also the idea that one of the beer festivals actually invited anonymous alcoholics to their festival to have a stand there, right? To engage with a community, to try and to be more inclusive, even of people that would challenge the challenger of the mainstream, basically, right? In terms of their product. So I think there is a sort of at least a mindset to do that. But I guess there are a lot of things that still need to be done.
I think we are pretty much we are sorry, lost the word. But we all who's working in the industry wants to work for a change, so we don't look away at the problems, because it's also that, like, we don't about maximizing profits. We don't have to sacrifice that part of our industry. We can work with that as well, even though it costs money or it takes time, and we can work with that. So.
Great, thank you. We have some interesting questions already coming in from the people online. So I'm going to start with one or two of those, but you who's here in the room, start getting your question hand ready to raise, and when you're ready for that, Louise will come around with the microphone so we can all hear you. So the first question we got in was actually really, just like Stefan's students in the classroom, was really interested about this idea of growth and how you measure success. So following up on this idea of success with a question about what targets you have for your business annually or in the next 3 to 5 years. Is it simply sales growth? Is that what you're going to be looking at and measuring?
For us, is the biggest target or whatever is volume of production. That's why we really we also have financial targets, as of course, but the one we're looking at the most is the volume of production, because we know that is is important for us to be able to do what we do.
And you have kind of targets for that, or are you just looking at it and seeing how it develops?
No, we have targets, definitely.
Have targets. Yeah. Is it the same for Bräckaget?
At this point, we have the volumes. We can't grow bigger where we are now without investing even more.
Yeah,
we don't want to do that right now. So for us, it's to keep the sales as previous year. That's the target, not going down, stay even.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
Our target is basically the limit of the production. So we want to hit the roof.
Wonderful. Thank you. Then there's a question from Liselott about the fact that the number of microbreweries is still increasing. And she wants to know whether you think that the smaller microbreweries can kind of not just survive, but also thrive in a market that might sooner or later become saturated.
Yes.
Again,
I had that question from a journalist this morning, actually, that called me about something, and I think that definitely we have 3 till 400. I correct you a little bit. I think it's more like 300, but 3 till 400 craft breweries. We have 5% of market share, and there's 4 breweries having 95% of it. So we are eating from their share every year. So we're getting bigger, and new players can come in, and they have a chance to come in because of our community, because we help out. How do you do when you try to build a new brewery, or you have to grow in volume or whatever? So everyone gets help. If you start a brewery, you can expect help from 300 other breweries. So it's really convenient as well.
So the plan there is not competing with each other and cannibalizing each other, but growing that 5% and eating into these other 4.
Yeah. And even if we're growing to 15%, it's still a small share of the whole cake, but would mean a lot for the industry, for our part of the industry.
So the image that is used in that study that I cited in the US of the US brewing company is that a tide lifts all the boats, right? So that's the image of sort of the tide of craft brewing will lift all craft breweries.
Yeah.
So the more each craft brewery sells, the more we educate the consumer about the product,
Yeah.
and the more we can grab the market shares, at least in this stage.
But that's totally correct. We help each other to, as you said, educate the consumers.
Stefan, you had some ideas or some research about what happens with this idea of what was this concept? Co-opetition.
Co-opetition.
Yeah, when this market share starts to grow, then maybe something's going to change.
Yeah, so I mean, the speculation is that it then turns into a regular competitive market, right? So if the market is saturated and if there is no more market shares to be gained, then you will start competing rather than co-opetiting or whatever you want to call it, right? So that is something that researchers would predict with the growth of a market, but so far this hasn't happened, and it hasn't happened in the US. So they may be wrong, but we might see in the future something that turns into a competition as well.
Definitely.
Some questions from the audience, I think, here. Louise is poised with the microphone.
Thank you for a very interesting discussion. I was wondering about the sustainability when you talked about the beer and being canned or bottled, and if you can elaborate a little bit more on what it means to be sustainable and how important it is from your perspective.
Yes, for us, it's or Christian mainly, is aiming to do a pure product. And to make a pure product, we need to use pure ingredients. That in combination with good working conditions, thinking about sustainability all the way. That's how we try to make our brewery sustainable. I don't know if that answers your question, but
I think it's. I think you can really talk about. The focus is. I mean, there are many breweries in Skåne that have a lot of hands-on technical solutions to treat wastewater, for instance. So Remmerlöv in close to Eslöv. Yeah. They really have really invested a lot of money and a lot of resources into reusing their water and treating the wastewater, and also using the feed for cows, for instance, or using the molds for cows and all that. So I think but then on the other hand, I think there's a lot of focus on social sustainability as well. So the idea of community, right? The idea of engagement, perhaps. The idea, I think, that you in those breweries also to involve the staff, right? To kind of include that human engagement, even if it's just a label or an idea or whatever. I think having a stake in the production process, having a stake in what is produced, I think that's already, a step towards some sort of perhaps social sustainability for employees working in an organization, however you define it, social sustainability. But it might reduce anxieties, it might reduce something of your kind of alienation or whatever with the production process. Perhaps.
Now is perhaps a good time to jump in with a question from Christopher online. He asks about water. Do you, or maybe other people that you know, other breweries that you know of, do you measure the water usage per beer produced? Is that something you think about in terms of sustainability?
Yes. At least we see the bill. No, but yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Short and sweet. Okay. More questions from the room.
Yes, thank you. If I may just comment on the previous question a little bit, I think for me, at least in craft, I'm also kind of engaged in this studying craft and so on, that the key point is not so much in technical fixes. I mean, a large brewery could also have technical fixes for, reducing water consumption and so on, but in the intrinsic encouragement, basically, to consume less.
Yeah.
which because it's slow. I mean, craft is usually slow, so it's more on the consumption side, or the drawing down on consumption rather than producing one unit as efficiently as possible, I think. For example. But my question wasn't about that. The question was about something else. And I think in craft, I mean, as Stefan said, it's very, and you also, that it's very much associated with engagement and enthusiasm and things like that. So I was thinking, if maybe this is kind of a personal question, but when it comes to work-life balance, which is an issue in all lines of work, of course, but maybe particularly here, I mean, I assume in a small organization you need to work much. That's the case in many organizations. I guess that's not unique to craft, but this passion and this that you're kind of emotionally engaged more than if you're a banker who works very much. Perhaps, I don't know. I've never been a banker. I just imagine that you're a little bit less engaged. Do you have anything to say about that? What's your work-life balance been like?
I was extremely engaged before, but then I got a daughter, and after that I tried to spend a lot of time with her. Always work too much anyways, but she's more important to me.
Yeah, I'm the same. No, but of course I work too much sometimes. Like you take the work home, but we don't expect the people that work for us to do that all the time. That goes for me because I like doing that. So we don't expect our coworkers to do it. When you quit your job, you can quit for the day and come back tomorrow and do the rest. And that's very important to us because not all of us, but a few of us have small children at home, and that's more important than anything. So.
Children are great enforcers of work-life balance.
In
my experience.
No, but it is. Yeah. You got a lot of things going on at home, and even if it's not children, if you have that, you should focus on that. That's really important for us.
I think we have time for one last question from the room here before we wrap up.
Thank you very much. You will not get a sustainability question from a sustainability scientist. Eric, you mentioned a couple minutes ago the word Systembolaget.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, is Systembolaget an enabler of craft and creativity, or does it hinder it?
Do we have another hour? Or? Both, I would say. For me personally, Systembolaget works, but not as good as it could have. So yes, we have the local assortment that is good for small breweries, and we pretty much decide ourselves what products to put on the shelf. And no, because it takes time to release a product. I said it was the quickest thing you can do before, but that's not on Systembolaget. That's in general. So I would say a little bit of both. I mean, I think that we have Systembolaget now. We might as well do the best in our everyday work together with them and try get them to change like small things that we think is important for us breweries. But of course we can also work on the bigger picture and see, do we really need Systembolaget, or is that important for? But that's the bigger question. So my focus now from like the organization is that we create a good everyday life for our member breweries to work with Systembolaget and not taking like the big political question or whatever if it's good or not. But I think it's good for craft beer and it's not good for craft beer.
It's a research answer, you know.
That's the short answer.
Yeah, but it depends on I can talk about Systembolaget for hours, but
We don't have hours, unfortunately. Even though there's, I'm sure, a lot more interesting questions from here in the room, it's time to wrap up.
yeah.
So, I think we can just conclude by saying there clearly is a lot that we can learn from craft when it comes to future of organizations, future of work, and hopefully the future of sustainability.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for joining us today at Lund's University School of Economics and Management. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, both of our real-life experts, Erik and Fredrik.
Thank you.
And thank you all in the audience for joining us.
Thank you.